Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, episode 37.
Started in on a book or a podcast, and as you said earlier, ended up waist deep in grass. And taking those, whatever you learned, whatever got you excited, and going out and trying it. Get started, do something, and see what happens.
You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers, and every episode features a grass farmer and their operation. I'm your host, Cal Hardage. On today's show, we have Jared Frye of C&F Farms. C&F Farms is a third-generational family farm where things have changed a lot over the years, but they've always taken pride in feeding their community. However, before we talk to Jared, can you do me a favor? Go to grazinggrass.com and sign up for our email list. We are busy working to improve the website and make it more useful for the community. Also, you may have noticed a slight absence. We took the month of August off, and we are very excited to be back. Let's talk to Jared. Jared, welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast. We're excited to have you on today.
Thanks, Cal. I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Jared, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation?
Sure. So I like to say I'm a third-generation farmer, first-generation grass farmer. I grew up on this farm. My grandfather started it back in the 40s, and later on, my mom took over. We've done everything from produce to crops, grains, and then later on, after mom kind of took over, it's gotten more into livestock. And so that's really been the focus of it. It was more of your standard cow-calf operation. We'd wean those calves and sell them in the fall, and that was just the way we'd gone with it. Pretty conventional, with constant or continuous grazing, I guess. So basically, we were fairly conventional. Had a continuous grazing. Cows had access to all the pasture all the time. So that's kind of the direction we'd been for a long time. Myself, I actually, after college, moved away for a while, worked a completely different industry. And we recently, in the last couple of years, moved back, and I started getting more involved in the farm. And we kind of started down this path. I wanted to find a way. We weren't really profitable. We weren't doing very well. It was more or less sustaining itself, but not great. So I started looking into grass-fed beef. We've been eating it ourselves, and started exploring what it meant and what it took to get that. Because I thought, well, we've got cows. They're eating grass. We're good. And that was when I started reading some of the names we all know now, the Greg Judys and the Joel Salatins and Gabe Browns, and really started digging into the soil health of it all and what that meant.
About how long ago was that?
Gosh, I started picking that up. It was about 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
That I really started digging into the details and the research. And man, I got hooked. It was like, this is cool. And, just the things we can do with that. And all right, if we don't let them in everywhere, and, started rotating. And so that just kind of started us down this path.
So it sounds like once you got hooked, and you got hooked pretty quick, and I have to confess, I think that happens to a lot of people. You stumble onto this, and then before you know it, you're knee deep in grass, which is a good thing.
That's right.
So you started diving deep into it. How quickly did you decide, hey, I need to go buy some polywire? I need to do something different.
Oh, I think I was ready to buy some before I got through the first book. I was ready to go. Of course, there were, with the way we were set up at the time, there was a little bit more infrastructure needed to get in place before we could really go full bore. But I don't think it wasn't but a couple of months after that I was I was ready to go. I had stuff on order, and we were going to start experimenting with little bits of it.
Oh, very good. So what was your first step to get started? But I guess actually, when I say first step, your first step is being exposed, reading the books. What was your next step to really get going?
So next step was really just figuring out, looking at the land we had and looking at, we converted an old hayfield to pasture, and starting to get some of the fencing set up so that we could start rotating cows. And initially we really it was me and a solar charger and some poly braid and step in posts and just making paddocks as we go.
Hey, I want to jump on that solar charger for just a second. Did
Sure.
you go down to a local feed store and buy a solar charger, or did you research and order a big high dollar Stay Fix one? I guess they're not Stay Fix now. They're
I didn't go down, didn't get one from the local feed store. That was something else that another rabbit hole I ended up down was the proper way, I guess you could say, of putting in electric fence. We've had electric fence for a long time on the farm. We used to use it around crops some and all, but never seemed to work. We never got much charge. So I started really digging into that, and that's where I found that we had a few things we weren't doing quite right there. So no, I ended up ordering a 1 joule solar charger. It was the biggest one that was available at the time, just the stock availability. So ordered that, and got myself a really big ground rod and some poly braid and went to it.
Very good. I think so many of us have that background where we've been exposed to electric fences, but they just haven't worked very good.
Mm-hmm.
And getting that big energizer for me, and then getting it grounded appropriately. Years ago, all we did, we'd buy a little cheap solar charger at the local feed store, and we'd set it on top of a T-post, hope it was aimed right, and run some wire.
Absolutely.
And if we grounded it to that T-post, that's painted and wasn't making a good connection.
Or an 8-inch piece of rebar we drove in about 6 inches. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I do think some of those cheap ones can really be improved by grounding.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I visited a farm here locally, and I was surprised to find he was just using I think a 0.16 joule charger, which was working for him.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing whenever we talk about any of these practices. If it's working for you, do it.
That's right.
If it's not, find out what will work.
That's right.
But for me, I've needed those bigger chargers. It makes my cows stay where they're supposed to be a lot better.
Yeah. It makes me feel better about it. For sure.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So you got a charger and some posts, and you started rotating. Did you immediately jump off the cliff into daily rotations? Or did you do a little bit just to kind of dip your toe into it, get your feet wet?
So initially we did, I think we were doing every 2 days.
Oh, yes.
And then once we kind of got the hang of it, we did go to daily. So we're still working through that, most of the time we're doing daily moves. Every now and then life gets the better of us, and we just have to put them in a little bit bigger area and give them that extra day or two there. But for the most part, we're trying to stick to the daily moves.
I completely understand. For listeners out there, Jared and I was talking before we got started. This has been quite a busy week for me. And I'll be honest, I can't say much about daily moves this week because I knew this week was going to be a crazy week. I gave my cows a bigger paddock and said, I'll see you in a couple days.
There you go. You gotta make it work for you.
Right. That's the great thing about, we talk about daily moves or really looking at the whole picture and figuring out what's going to work there. What's your goals? But there's times you don't have the time to do those moves, even as quick as they can be in places. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility with that.
Yep. Absolutely. You got to adapt to what's happening around you.
Exactly right. Exactly. How'd your cows respond to the start on rotational grazing?
So I think at first they were a little confused. Just going from that continuous grazing, having wherever they wanted to go whenever.
Yeah, they're like, "Why is he out here again?"
Right. We don't need to see you again now. But they pretty quickly got the hang of it. I think after that, it was probably after that first week. I mean, they knew where the reel was, and they would be in the morning. They'd be up there by the reel waiting, ready to go. So the biggest challenge after they kind of warmed up to it was moving from paddock to paddock, in where we were going through a gate opening. They still don't love the gate openings. They get a little spooky there, but we're working through that.
So that brings up an interesting question, at least to me. So when you get ready to move your cows through to a new paddock, are you pulling down a lot of fence and letting them go through? Or are you having them walk over? You have them walk underneath?
So
how do you do those moves?
So I've been to move paddock to paddock. We do roll the wire up. I tried a couple of times letting it down on the ground, or the raising it up, and they just stood there and stared at me like, nope, don't trust it.
Well, I've had the same experience. I'm always afraid to lower it because I don't want them to get in the habit of stepping over it, but I'm not exactly sure they would. But I've read, where they will raise them up and let the cows walk under, and my cows just stood there and looked at me, and so I always roll mine back up and get them around. But I think that's interesting. I know different people do it different ways, and some days I wish my cows would just take the shortcut and go under when I raise it up, rather than walking clear down to the end of the field.
I was going to say, it's always those times that the reel is way too far away, and I'm like, come on, you can do this. You can get under there. And it never seems to work out. So I always end up doing that walk.
It really helps you get those 10,000 steps in a day.
Absolutely.
We're all supposed to get. Yes. So what kind of cows are you running, and is that what you started with?
So we're still running based off the original herd we've had, which is mostly Angus cross. We do have a couple of, or I guess now we've got one Charolais left in the herd.
Oh, yes.
So we're using that as of right now. We're looking to kind of transition that as we get more and more into this. We bought a South Pole bull, a yearling South Pole bull, back earlier this year, that we're looking forward to putting in with the girls, and starting to transition towards some of that.
How big would you say your cows are right now?
Right now we are on the bigger side. I think.
Oh yeah.
We've got a couple on the smaller, probably 1,200 pounds, up to around 1,400. So.
Oh yes.
That's one of our goals there, is to start transitioning down into a smaller body size. I think given the land size we're working with, that'll help us a lot.
Very good. I know we're on a similar journey, and it seems like a lot of people are. Of course, you watch the Greg Judy videos, and you're going to be on that journey.
Right. Let's get as many of those as we can, right?
Right. Now, you mentioned earlier you took an old hay field, and then you've been doing continuous grazing. What kind of forages do you have out in your pastures?
So our existing pastures are mainly fescue. We've got a little bit of clover mixed in, with, just in a random smattering of other grasses, and we've got our fair share of weeds and all out there as well. The hay field that we just converted this year, that again, it's got a lot of fescue. There's some orchard grass, and right now in this time of year, we've got a lot of Johnson grass coming up in that one, which I know is a dirty word for a lot of folks, but the cows love it, so I'm good with grazing it.
Well, that's kind of my thoughts, and I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. If I have, we'll go back to the story again. I love Johnson grass. The amount of foliage it puts out. One of the pastures I have leased is probably half
Mhm.
Johnson grass, and it is just growing great guns right now. Now, granted, you got to be careful in drought conditions, and you got to be careful around um, frost or freezing weather. We had, when I was a kid, it really influenced me. We had a dry year, and we had a 10-acre hay meadow across the road. And it was a dry year, and Dad decided, hey, we're going to graze this hay meadow out. So we put cows over there, and Dad had, I don't know, 19, 20 cows, something in that range. Put the cows over there. 3 of them died from eating Johnson grass. So, I remember that, and I think about that when I see the Johnson grass, but I also think about all the
Right.
forage out there, and I just try and manage it. I really like it. Everyone else around here's digging it up, spraying it, but I'm out there like
That's
I
right.
can
As
manage
long
this.
as you can stay with it, managing it, it's another tool in the tool belt. That's more feed for
It
them. That's a
is.
good thing. So I'm not going to be digging it up. That's for sure.
It's a little warm out there right now.
That's
Digging
right.
it up too. Do you plan on seeding anything in, or are you just going to use your cattle to really manage the pasture, or do you have any plans for inputs on that?
So far we've kind of just used the cattle to kind of manage that. We did this year experiment a little bit with we broadcasted out a summer cover crop mix. I think it was a 7 or 8 species mix. And we just broadcast that in front of the cows and kind of let them work it in as they came through a paddock. And it's been as dry as it's been. We haven't seen a lot of results from it. The one thing that's come up has been sorghum Sudan. We've had a lot of that popping up out of that mix, which they have loved. On their second pass through there, they've hammered that. So, but yeah, I think for right now, we do plan in the future to try and convert some of our older pastures and get the diversity up a little more there. But we're just trying to kind of figure out our management and keep the cows moving through there.
Right, and not jump in too much with the inputs before you get going the way you want.
Right.
Interesting thing about the sorghum Sudan, I have not used it, but I visited a farm a while back, and he took where he rolled out his hay, he spread that on his hay in the spring, and so all his patches that had hay on it, which when he rolled out his hay was a little bit thicker than when I roll it out. So he was going to have some bare spots there while, that hay decomposed and grasses started taking over that. And he spread that sorghum Sudan over it. And he had a really nice crop coming up through that hay. I was impressed. In fact, I was thinking, I may need to plant some next year.
Yep. We're thinking that's a good one to use as a primary cover crop in some of our rougher areas, because it seems to be coming up well, and they love it. So
now we talked a little bit about old hay meadow and pasture. I'm not sure we discussed, where are you located and what kind of ground do you have there?
So we're in Southwest Virginia. We're just in we're in Bonsack, Virginia, which is a little area right outside of Roanoke. And we are, I guess you'd say, light rolling hills. We do have some flat spots, but most everything has some angle to it. But nothing too steep. We're not up into the West Virginia mountains or anything like that. So not too bad to work with.
Oh, very good. Do you have a lot of rock in your ground?
Yes.
Near the surface?
There is a good bit of rock there. I know sometimes putting step in posts out, I'll try about 6 times before I can get it in more than 2 inches, because there's a rock there, and there. But
oh yes, yeah. Well, I do understand that. Now, are you finding, as you rotationally graze, so last year was your first year rotationally graze, and you're doing it this year, have you seen more forage available? I mean, of course, everything we read, yeah, you should have more forage by rotational grazing. And you're going to look out there and you're going to say, hey, there's got to be more forage because I'm rotationally grazing. But
It's supposed to just
have you
happen.
really noticed that?
It's funny. We have noticed it in this year. We've noticed it a lot in the hay, the old hayfield that we converted.
Oh, yes.
That has just bounced right back after grazing. I think a lot of our other paddocks are still in their recovery from their continuous grazing days.
Oh, yes.
And this has been a pretty dry year for us, so a lot of those haven't bounced back nearly as quick. But I think we're seeing a good impact just with with them working through some of the weed control. And I think through some of this, we're finding the cows will eat things we never thought they would too, which has been fun to watch.
Yes. It's always great to turn them into some ragweed and watch them just strip those ragweed stems down to nothing.
Oh yeah, we have one hillside that was just covered in cocklebur plants, and
oh yes,
so I went through there earlier this year. I broadcast that cover crop mix, and I'm just going to turn them in here, keep them nice and tight, let them stomp it all in. They won't be here long. We'll have to move them on, get them some grass because they're. And so we turned them in, and I came back in a couple hours to check on them, expecting to move them on, get them some grass. They were all laid down, chewing their cud, happy as could be. They'd stripped every one of those plants down.
Yes.
Said okay.
It's I love seeing cucumbers stripped down like that. Ragweed, any of those, yeah. Now, when you started rotationally grazing, you mentioned a little bit of infrastructure, and that brings us to water. Do you have enough natural water to water your animals, or how are you doing that?
So initially, when we started out, everything's coming off of a well there at the farm, and we have a few hydrants and water points set up from back when we did vegetable crops. So initially we were, because with the continuous grazing, they always had access to creeks, streams, whatever, the pond on the farm. But with this, I wanted to start kind of restricting that, keeping them out of there. So we ended up just running a lot of garden hose out to tanks with a float valve to get water wherever we needed it. This year, we actually we were able to get a grant through the local soil and water district.
Oh yes.
So we are in the process. We've gotten most of the work done. We're still working through getting some waterers and some extra water points set up, and a little boundary fencing to keep them out of those creeks, which has helped a lot with just being able to. It's helped me manage moves a lot easier. It's a lot less polybraid to run out, not dragging hose around.
Oh yes, imagine so. As we move through summer, fall will be here quick, and then we'll be looking at winter feeding. What's your plan there? Have you baled hay? Are you going to stockpile?
So we do still make our own hay. We've got some leased ground nearby that we've always made hay on, and so we're still doing that. My goal is every year to reduce the amount we need a little bit. So I do anticipate still needing some hay this year, but luckily we're not taking it off our own land anymore. We're able to bring that in from there. So I would like to stockpile some, given we've got so much fescue. I think we're set up for that.
Oh yes.
I'm hoping for a wet fall to help get to that. Right now the grass is a little thin there, but we'll see. I think we're working on a plan there with hopefully a couple paddocks we're keeping them out of, and then with our hay stockpile, I think we'll be able to get through it.
Very good. I think that's a great plan, and hopefully you get nice fall rains, because that can really affect your amount you stockpile.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got our fingers crossed.
Now, on your cattle, I'm jumping back just a little bit to
Sure.
your cattle. You'd mentioned earlier on you calved in the spring and sold them in the fall. Is that something you're continuing to do? Have you changed your calving season any?
We have not. No, we haven't changed our calving season really. Although it was really only, gosh, it's been only a couple of years ago now that we started pulling the bull at certain times of the
Oh,
year.
yes.
So he ran with the herd year round for the longest time, and so we've really started trying to narrow that down and get into a specific calving season. But for now we're still doing mostly spring calving.
So you've been on this journey just a couple of years, but what challenges have you really found in trying and go this way?
I think one of the first challenges I didn't expect was the need for shade. And
Oh,
when
yes.
when I'm creating those paddocks, and that's a shade when they were out and had access to the whole paddock. They of course wandered to wherever they needed for shade, and once I've got them in my specific paddocks and we're moving them about, I had put a lot more thought into access to shade. And I was surprised at how little we had in a lot of our places, or a lot of our paddocks. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So that's one that we had to address. I wasn't expecting.
So do you have a plan for growing more shade?
So for right now, we just we're using sort of a mobile shade setup, that
Oh,
a,
yes.
a hay wagon type setup, where we need it. There's most of the areas I can finagle some wire around and get them some trees to hide under for a little bit. We were actually just talking the other day. Now that we've got some of our fencing in and some of that worked out, starting to plant some trees, maybe in a few select areas. So hopefully in a few years we've got a little more shade to work with.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Now, in addition to your cattle, do you run any other livestock on your farm?
So we do. We also do pastured pork. So we run hogs. Right now, they're enjoying an old retired apple orchard that we've set up for them. So yeah, we're running hogs, sort of adjacent to our cattle.
Oh, yes. And are you rotationally, or are you moving them, or they're pretty stationary?
Yeah, we are moving them. We set up. Gosh, I forget how many paddocks now, but we've got quite a few paddocks run through that orchard, and some a little bit of adjoining pasture off of that. And so we try and move them every 7 to 14 days, probably, just
Oh,
depending
yeah.
on how big a mess they're making where they are, tearing through it. We try and keep them moving.
Now, for your pigs, do you have sows and boars, or are you buying feeder pigs and growing them out?
Right now, we're just buying feeders and growing
Oh,
those
yes.
out.
How long have you been doing the pasture pork side?
This is our first year with the pigs, so we're on our second group now.
Oh, yes. And so are you enjoying it? How you feel it's going?
Well, I think it's going really well, and I was surprised, honestly, at how big a hit that the hogs were. I know. So my mom helps a lot. We farm together still, and she helps a lot. And when we got our first group of pigs, she almost just stayed over there at the pig paddocks watching them. She goes, "They're just
Oh,
so
yes.
cool to watch." And we joked that if we couldn't ever find mom, go check the pig paddock. She's probably got a lounge chair and a beer over there just watching the pigs play. And so that continues, even with the second group. Everybody comes to see the pigs. So
Oh, yes.
but no, they're going really well. We've got them. We keep them in high tensile electric also, and they once we kind of get them trained to that and the moves, honestly, they just kind of go right along with it, and have been a lot of fun so far.
Let's talk about that training bit. When you buy those feeder pigs in, how do you train them to a hot wire?
So we have we'll call it our first paddock there. We've got a little area set up where we just took some T-posts and hog panels. So we had a hard area for them there. And then ran a hot wire along the inside of it. And we've got, our 2 gates in and out there. So they've got their safe space to go to. And we turn them in there and let them hang out for about a week and a half, depending on how quick a learning they are. And they pick it up pretty quick.
They're pretty smart animals, so
yeah. And we try to keep the fence fairly hot, especially during training, because that helps them, reinforce that, and then later on they don't test it nearly as much.
Oh yes. Now, do you use the same energizer for your cattle and for your pigs, or do you have separate energizers?
I have separate energizers for those. Right now they're far enough apart that it was just logistically a lot easier to do 2 separate energizers.
And that makes sense. And I could even see them being close together. You might want to keep them separate, just kind of as a fail-safe. But
right.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, what's some challenges you've experienced this year with your hogs?
I would say, let's see, where they are. So the 2 things that we've run across so far, where they are, this apple orchard is actually one of the steeper areas that we've got. So,
yes,
we have a large feeder we keep in there, and use a large tank waterer. And so when we do the moves, dragging those from paddock to paddock, it can be a little treacherous at times. They tend to want to. You're pulling them along. You can just see them leaning and leaning. It's like, are we going to make it?
Yes.
So dealing with that terrain, and then I think the other thing that we ran into with our first batch, we did have one right before we were getting ready to take her off, and we don't know if it was playing or the terrain in the hill country, but she broke her back leg.
Oh no.
So that was, always a tough thing to deal with, but
oh yes.
I think otherwise they've been fairly easy. We only had one get out. We still aren't sure how that happened. She managed to make it a couple thousand yards down the road. Luckily we live at the end of the road. And my cousin called and said, you got a pig down here. and we managed to get her back up. Mom went down and drove the car down and said, "Come on, pig," and up the road she went with her. And we got her back in. We walked that fence. We have no idea how she got out. We never found a hole or anything that looked like it'd been roughed up. But so they've so far, knock on wood, they've done really well.
Very good. Very good. How are you marketing your beef, and how are you marketing your pastured pork?
So we currently are selling mainly through our website. We've got a website set up, and we do pickup locations each week. So you place your order and select where you'd like to pick it up, and then we'll meet you there with your order. We're working on getting into a few of the local farmers markets to do that. We've been at a couple of different, more, I guess, pop-up style markets, and done some of the local fairs and different things. So, and then I think next week, actually, we're going to be, we're getting a freezer in a local retail place here that hoping to set that up and start selling some product through there, which will be, I think that'll be really good.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Where do you see your farm going in the next few years, or where do you hope it goes?
Well, I'm really hoping to do a couple of things. I'd like to expand our footprint a little bit. There's some adjacent land that I'm hoping to get onto and work into our grazing rotation, and just kind of expand that and allow us to hopefully expand the herd a little bit and continue to grow that. And then I think probably more a couple years down the road. We're really looking to kind of start stacking more enterprises on the land that we've got. We've talked about adding a form of pastured poultry or something else there. I think getting some more diversity and adding to what we've already got will be another good next step.
Oh, yes. Well, Jared, we've enjoyed hearing about your operation and your story. It's time we move on to the overgrazing section where we take a deep dive into one of your farm practices or something about your farm. What are we going to talk about today?
So I thought, I struggled coming up with an idea for this. I wasn't sure where to go. And I thought maybe we could talk about adaptability, which, maybe a little broader and not necessarily a practice, but
it is very important.
Absolutely. And as I said, as we've talked about, me transitioning our farm from the more of the conventional basis and getting into more grass farming. There's, like I said, when I first researched it, I thought, well, we've got cows and we've got grass, we can do this. And then, of course, that's when you start down the first rabbit hole, and there's so many challenges that will pop up, and you want to. I found myself initially, you want to fix the paddocks or these squares here, and so we're going to do this, and we're going to do it in this order, and whether it's Mother Nature or the cows, or there's always something that's going to throw that wrench in your formula, and so I think being adaptable. It's really important. I think to be successful, you got to be able to think quickly, think on your feet, and try your best not to get stuck into, the idea that you planted in your head reading that book. I think that's one challenge I had as well was reading the books or listening to podcasts or different things, and you hear, folks doing operations much larger than mine, or the guys, Gabe Brown, who's obviously wildly successful at it by now, and all right, I'm going to do it just like that. And my operation, my land base, there's so many things about mine that aren't like any of theirs, and just being able to think, okay, but what was the goal? What do I really want to get out of that? So how do I change that and adapt the principle of it and what they're trying, what they're actually doing, and make that into something that, that'll work for me, so I can get the end goal that I want out of it.
I think you bring up some wonderful points there. We talk to a lot of producers on this podcast, and there's a lot of overlapping themes that we discuss. A lot of my questions are the same, but everyone's doing it just a little bit different. Everyone's farm's a little bit different. And there's not just a recipe that you go out and you add 3 rows of polywire and 2 stock tanks and you're good to go. It really depends on what you're working with. And then as you get started, be prepared to change, because, well, this year it didn't rain as much, so we're going to have to change this. Or we got more water. Now it's wet and I can't graze where I wanted to graze. You just got to have that,
Absolutely.
that goal in mind and be ready to adapt to whatever Mother Nature throws at you, whatever the livestock decide to do. So many things, but adaptability is a important characteristic, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And it's tough. I mean, you see so many great examples, and you see these operations, and you're like, man, that's what I want to be doing, and you gotta be careful and not get stuck into a, well, why am I not looking like X, Y, or Z over there? And as long as you're making improvements and you're doing the best you can with it, you're on the right track. So adapt it and make it work for you.
I hate to even bring this up because we've already mentioned Greg Judy a couple times, but one of his videos just the other day, which I thought was a really good video, he was talking about he had put up the paddocks with high tensile wire because he's working off the farm and he needed it easy to do. And then when he got a little bit bigger, he just continued doing that. And then one of his first interns was like, why do you have these wires? We're sending the cows through. We've got trails going through every gate. And they went through and tore those all out and changed the way he was doing it. I think that's a great example of that adaptability or flexibility. And consider what you're doing, because as I work off the farm and I come home to do something, my ability or even desire to work on something may be a little less than someone who doesn't have that off the farm job, or just even the time commitment and stuff. So just look at your own operation and figure out what works. Try it.
Right. Exactly. It's one of those things you gotta just try it at some point, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but
Right.
you'll never know until you try. And once you do, you can, if it works, great. If not, you adapt and you change.
Yes, exactly.
It kind of goes back to what we were saying about the paddock sizes. Sometimes, you're going to have a heck of a week this week, or, something's going to keep you from getting to it for a day or two. So maybe you want to do daily moves, but you just got to do, a 3-day move or a 4-day move, whatever it needs to be, so that you're able to keep going with whatever else you got going on. So.
Right. Yes. Well, thank you, Jared, for that. Discussing adaptability. Let's move on to our famous same 4 questions we ask of every guest. So our very first question: what's your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
Well, I know you mentioned a lot of overlap, so I'm gonna probably end up doing that. Because that's a tough one. I think we mentioned we've read all the books. I think right now probably one of my biggest things is podcasts. I've found myself spending a lot of time in the truck lately. So I got a lot of time to listen, and I'm getting a lot more exposure to different groups, different mindsets, and different things that have been really, really beneficial, I think. So I think those have helped me a lot, just to even spark ideas that'll get me going down a yet another rabbit hole. But I think those have been right now probably my most used thing.
It seems to me we're having a boom in podcasts, which are exciting to have all these different ones. I know we'll start with this podcast first because I'm here talking about it. The Grazing Grass,
Absolutely.
We try and focus on talking to producers and what they're doing on their land and their operation, their practices. And you've got Ranching Reboot that's doing stuff. You've got the Herd Quitter podcast talking more experts and stuff. You got the old guard of working cows going on. There's Roots and Ruminants out there. I'm trying to think. I'm sure I'll miss some. You got the Shepherdess at Harmony Farms that does a podcast. And Eli Mack, that was on one of our early episodes, just released a pilot for his called the Pennsylvania Grazer. So be sure and check that one out. I think it'll be great. Eli's a great advocate for regenerative and holistic management, and he's talking about his journey, as well as he's planning on having some people in there to talk about, just to gain some knowledge in different areas. And I'm sure I left some more out, but I just think all those podcasts are wonderful, because who knows, you may not like listening to me. There's someone else out there you may like listening to. And,
right. Or if you don't like the topics on one,
yeah,
you can still stay within regenerative and listen to another.
I think all of those podcasts I mentioned, I subscribe to. I will not say I listen to them all, because I've got a set number of hours, but I do pay attention to what topics are on there. And the Herd Quitter podcast had Wally Olson on there, which he was on there for 2 episodes. Yes. Wally's a local guy that I know. But I was just really impressed with what Wally had to say. There's so much out there. So I think podcasts is or to me, of course, I'm doing a podcast, so maybe I shouldn't say this, but podcasts are a rising resource that's really coming out there and available for you to binge listen to.
Yep. No, I would totally agree. I'm in a lot of the regenerative Facebook groups, and I always, periodically you'll see the, request for what are you guys listening to, and I always check those out because there's a lot of repeats, but there's always at least a couple in there that I haven't found or heard yet. So yeah, I'm always looking for some new ones.
I do have a downside to podcasts, and I'll go ahead and put this out there in case other people experience this. I love listening to podcasts whenever I drive somewhere. The downside is my wife will not listen to them. She's like, nope, we're not listening to another grass-based podcast. But that may just be me.
No, I don't think you're solely alone on that.
Before I get in trouble for that topic, let's move on to question number 2.
All right.
What tool could you not live without on your farm?
So this one's definitely a repeat, but my Energizer remote. That sucker stays in my back pocket all day.
I fully understand that.
Yeah, my solar Energizer doesn't have a remote on it. So when I was using that a lot more, and then I started using one with a remote, I was like, oh, I gotta get out of this. I need the one with the remote, man. It comes in handy everywhere.
I'm in the same boat. I have a solar charger, and it works great. It's enough joules, but it doesn't have a remote. Mm-hmm. So I am thinking about changing that out because I love that remote.
Absolutely.
Our third question, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you began? Or what would you tell someone just starting out on this grass journey?
So I think one of the biggest things, obviously, I mean, if you're starting out on the journey, you've probably done like the rest of us and started in on a book or a podcast, and as you said earlier, ended up waist deep in grass. And so taking those whatever you learned, whatever got you excited, and going out and trying it, get started, do something, and see what happens. And then if you can find somebody local that you could drive to that's doing something like or similar to what you're doing. I know there's a guy 45 minutes from here in Blacksburg that I kind of happened upon through a Facebook group, and I ended up at his farm a couple of times now. And, just in talking with him, I've learned a lot about this already. Just, some different techniques, different things. So just in a couple of conversations, and we still stay in touch. So, reach out and try and make some of those connections too.
Excellent advice. Get started and network. Both so important. And Jared, where can others find out more about you?
So you can find us on our website at it's cffarms.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. So CF Farms on either of those platforms. And you can also, I'm open to anybody reaching out. You can shoot me an email. You can get that through the website or send me a message on any social media. Always love to talk. So
wonderful. Jared, we appreciate you coming on and sharing. Did a wonderful job, and I think it'll be greatly valuable to our listeners to hear about your journey.
Well, thanks, Cal. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed it. This was fun.
Another podcast I just received an email about today is the Fat Cows Fat Wallet podcast with Jim Elizondo. Jim was on episode 13 of the Grazing Grass Podcast. I haven't listened to it yet, but I plan to listen soon. I am sure it'll be very informational and a great podcast to subscribe to. You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers, and every episode features a grass farmer and their operation. You can find the Grazing Grass Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we encourage you to share our posts with others when you find an episode valuable. We appreciate you sharing about our podcast. Are you a grass farmer? Would you be interested in sharing about your journey and what you're doing on your operation? Go to grazinggrass.com, click on Be Our Guest link and fill out the information, and we'll be in touch. Until next time, keep on grazing grass. Hey there, listeners. We appreciate you tuning in and want to continue bringing you the best content we can. But producing a podcast takes a lot of time and effort, so we need your support. You can help us out by joining the Grazing Grass community and becoming a supporter for exclusive content and early releases. Also, you can buy our merch to show your love for the show, or by using our affiliate links to purchase products or services we recommend. If you can't support us financially, please spread the word and tell others about our show. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to bring you more great conversations from grass farmers like you.